A good Wednesday morning to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in for a look at your extended forecast. It was another mighty chilly morning, but I was all for it. Definitely seeing some numbers that were not only just below the 60-degree mark, but well into the 50s this morning was a very pleasant sight. So definitely still having that premature taste of the fall season. And as we go into the afternoon, going to be very similar to yesterday. But then starting tomorrow on Thursday, we will have some changes on the horizon. We'll go over the latest here as we go through everything with your extended forecast. So the taste of fall continues, and yes, today is going to be the coolest that we get, especially this morning. However, as we go throughout the next couple of days, we're still going to be below average for the next 7 days, and it looks like maybe even beyond that. We don't see any sign of those 90s making a return. Rain chances are back in the forecast tomorrow, so that's one of the reasons that we are talking about some changes as we head into the end of the work week. But then it could be a bit of a gloomy weekend ahead. We'll go over the latest with our long-range models, and now FutureView has Friday within sight, so we'll go over what we're seeing in terms of that. Here's a look at your temperatures. There are still upper 60s on the temperature map here as we get close to 11 a.m. It still feels mighty comfortable outside, and you can see the farther east and southeast that you go. That's where some of your warmer numbers do reside. 75 in McRae, 79 in Vidalia, 76 in Swainsboro. But over here, Macon, Warner Robins, mainly west of I-75, still 68s and 69s very widespread across our westernmost counties. Most everyone, I would say, hovering around 72 degrees this morning, but it is still a pretty good dividing line. You're seeing some shades of green transitioning into a yellow and then eventually an orange as you make your way down I-16 closer to the coast. Here's a look at your numbers across the eastern half of the United States. This frontal boundary continuing to make its presence known in the form of that cooler and drier air it brought in behind it. Take a look at all the numbers to the north of us, somewhere in the 60s, 70 degrees in Nashville. So obviously we always look for the warmest temperature on the map here at this hour. But let's talk about maybe some of the cooler temperatures. We're 69 degrees in Macon, 68 degrees in areas like Taylor County, Upson County into Crawford County. Well, you can see that it's not good enough for the coolest temperature, and we won't really focus on areas farther over to the west because they were a little bit later to get to the sunrise this morning. We'll kind of focus on these areas right on the eastern part of the central time zone and over here in the east time zone, where you can see 65 in Indianapolis, 66 in Lexington, and then 67 in St. Louis right there. So our temperatures are not too far off those areas up there in the Ohio Valley region of the United States. It is crazy to think that we are having a very uniform forecast to areas farther up to the north of us. And obviously you can see very close behind the banner, we have Green Bay and Minneapolis up there. I imagine they're probably somewhere in the lower 60s, maybe even still lingering in the 50s. But overall, this is a widespread cold front that is making its presence known in the form of that cooler and drier air. But those areas that are still holding on to the heat and humidity, like the peninsula of Florida, getting down into southern Louisiana and southern Texas, you can still see some 83s. So 83 will be the warmest temperature that we see here at this hour. That will be found in Jacksonville, Orlando, over to New Orleans, and down in Laredo in southern Texas. Now taking a look at the dew point temperatures. Seen a little bit of an increase over the last couple of hours, but overall this is still dominated by that light green shade and plenty of areas of no color whatsoever, where we can even pick out some dew point temperatures in the mid-50s still, especially over in Upson County. That's impartial due to the topography. They typically are hovering a little bit drier just due to the higher elevation levels over there in Upson County. Not talking about a mountain over near Thomaston, but still just a little bit higher than some lower lying areas that we were referring to when we were talking about those areas of deep dark green, especially over the last couple of weeks. So there does remain some dark green shades closer to the coast of Georgia. Could we see any of those maybe push up into central Georgia throughout today? I think the short answer is going to be no with that, but we will look at a steady increase. Some of those dew point temperatures probably climbing into the mid, maybe even the upper 60s. So here's a look at your feels like numbers, still feeling pretty true to the actual values over in our westernmost counties. Really across most of central Georgia. Actually, Vidalia is the only one I do believe is feeling a little bit warmer than what the actual temperature is. So it feels like 80 degrees as opposed to the actual temperature being 79 degrees. We're not going to see too much fluctuation with those as we go throughout today. But the winds and the wind gusts starting to get pretty breezy, building in from the north and the northeast. We could have an occasional breeze up to about 15 miles per hour throughout today, but overall not going to be as gusty as Monday when our actual front was coming through. Just maybe a little bit of a breeze to make it feel even better outside, especially paired up with that drier air. So let's talk about the numbers. 85 was our high temperature yesterday, so 6 degrees below average for this time of year. 60 degrees was the low yesterday. That's 10 degrees below average. So obviously you can see that the cooler air makes its presence known a little bit more as you go into the morning hours as opposed to the afternoon time frame. We were 3 degrees above the record low back in 2015 of 57 degrees. Keep that number in mind because that's something we'll be talking about when we flash up today's almanac. But your departure of rain, we haven't gotten any rain in about 3, maybe even 4 days here in the Macon area. Actually, I believe it's 3 because we did record some rain at least on Sunday. So your departure, we are still over 7 inches above where we should be this time of year. So yes, we can go into a long dry stretch and not really need anything in the way of rain, and that number is still going to be above average. So let's talk about today's almanac. Average high and average low unchanged, 91 and 70 degrees. 103 for the record, not even going to sniff that today, but 57. That was the record low temperature this morning, set back in 1952. So that is a 73-year-old record. Did we get very close? I did mention that we saw even Monticello and maybe some other areas in northern central Georgia get down into the mid-50s this morning. Well, you'll have to stay tuned and get that answer because I do have a graphic about it as we continue to talk about some of the highs and lows for the days that are in the future. So the chilly morning will translate into another dry, mostly sunny afternoon. High temperature of 85, so quite literally a copy and paste forecast of what we did have in store yesterday afternoon. And when you pair it up with the drier air, the heat indices still going to feel true to what the actual temperature is, maybe even a degree lower at some point in time. But the big thing I want you to pay attention to, and we haven't really talked too much about it, I really focus on the mornings and the afternoons when I do this forecast, and then we kind of go day by day as we go into the future. But let's talk about this evening because the evenings are going to feel mighty nice. As we go into around dinner time, just past dinner time, we're already feeling like the upper 70s. Once we get to 8 p.m. tonight, typically we're still holding on to feels like numbers in the low 90s all the way until 9 p.m. and then we finally see these numbers get below the 90-degree mark somewhere in the upper 80s. But if you're staying up late tonight, maybe till 11 p.m., obviously it's a Wednesday. I imagine many of you probably hitting the hay early and trying to finish out the work week strong. But say we're to keep this kind of weather around as we go into Thursday and Friday, college football games, you may find yourself out and about. 70 degrees, the feels like temperature at 11 p.m. So the evening and nighttime hours are going to be incredibly pleasant. That's going to be a good time to make sure that you're outside, especially today while we don't have any rain chances in the forecast. So satellite and radar picture, nothing worth talking about. A good cluster of cloud cover moving through, however. It does look like this is mainly of the high level cloud cover variety. That's what we've seen over the course of all the morning hours today. And I think that's all we're going to really get a good glimpse of throughout the rest of this afternoon. So satellite and radar picture, I'm taking a big picture view. Can't even find anything in the way of rain in the near vicinity, but that's obviously because we're taking our radar scan here in Macon. We would have to pop up the big picture, kind of satellite and radar picture. I imagine there's some rain over towards the west and probably down towards the south as we go into Florida. So let's go through future view. Not too many talking points today. You may see a few very minuscule green dots pop up, and that is a very small sprinkle chance if you do catch one. I've still elected to not go with the rain chance today, even if you do see those, because it's really not even enough to really warrant a 10% chance of rain. If we had a 10% chance of rain, I'd like to see at least a little bit better coverage and maybe some longer lived showers than just a brief pop up on one scan and then going away the next scan. That's obviously not picking apart exactly what could happen, but a few clouds in the picture as we go into this afternoon and evening. Probably not going to see anything in the way of rain. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and tell you it's going to be another dry day here in central Georgia. We do have some cloud cover building into the morning hours on Thursday, so that's where we're going to start to see some changes first. and that's going to correlate to maybe some slightly warmer temperatures as we kick off tomorrow morning. And when I mean slightly warmer, I mean slightly warmer. We're not looking like a substantial temperature climb is in store as we walk out the door tomorrow. It's still going to feel mighty pleasant. Going into tomorrow afternoon, you'll start to see these little green dots. They're going to continue to pop up here and there. I think a couple of them could have a bit of a longer lifespan than what Future View is exactly hinting at. But with this latest model run, we're actually seeing a whole lot of cloud cover in the picture. We may not necessarily get up to the high temperature that I have forecasted for tomorrow, but I do believe the longer that we go without seeing that cloud cover, that is going to lead to a pretty good warm up, just like what we saw yesterday, just like we're going to see this afternoon. But this cloud cover and even a couple light showers are going to linger into the overnight hours, and some of those may last into the morning time frame. Here's 6 a.m. on Friday, and still maybe some spots of some dark green. So hey, that's the most substantial rain chance I've seen so far over the last couple of days. But it does look like that cloud cover breaks apart as we go throughout the day on Friday. And then as we go into Friday evening, maybe some rain chances farther down to the south and the southwest. I think that's going to be a theme. We're seeing pretty good consistency with this as we go model run to model run here with the graph model. Mainly the rain has been coming in clusters, and it's mainly been towards our south and our southwest as we go into the very end of the work week. So I would say areas like Macon County, getting down to Dooley, Crisp, Wilcox counties. You guys will probably have a better rain chance than the rest of central Georgia. If you live up in Putnam, Hancock, or Washington counties, probably going to go without rain for the third day in a row, but it's all going to depend on the moisture content that we have available, and we'll talk about that as well. So over the next 3 days, I do have rain chances popping up, and obviously these chances are going to fluctuate. All you need to know is Thursday and Friday are some better chances of rain as opposed to what we are going to see throughout today, which is going to be nothing in the way of rain chances. Take a look at that low temperature. I flipped it to 58 this morning when I came in because some numbers were already at 59 degrees as early as about 3:30, 4 a.m. in the morning, so I knew we still had a couple of hours to cooling to go, and we even saw some values get as low as 55 that I saw today, and that is crazy to even think about for the month of August. 85 for a high temperature tomorrow. Again, that may bump down if we see good agreement that cloud cover will be fairly widespread for Thursday afternoon. And then going into Friday, high temperature of 80. Well, obviously may do some flip-flopping with that because it looked like we get pretty good clearing in the afternoon on Friday according to this latest Future View model run. Thunderstorm obviously wasn't lining up with what Future View said, but I do think that we're going to see a steady uptick in the moisture day by day, and that's going to create a more conducive environment for some scattered showers. And I wouldn't even rule out a stray rumble of thunder, but whatever you see in the way of a thunderstorm, not going to be of severe criteria. We definitely don't have the ingredients for popping up some severe weather in the forecast. So afternoon high temperatures, 85 and 85, then down to 80 for Friday and Saturday and 82 on Sunday. I think the combination of cloud cover and some better rain chances will keep our numbers down just a touch Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that's going to kind of create a bit of a gloomy and maybe even a bit of a dreary forecast over the course of this weekend. But again, not going to be a continuous washout. It doesn't look like anything really in the way of impressive rain chances according to Future View. However, we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for it, see if we can find some model agreement. It's best or better to be safe than sorry this time of year. Obviously, we talk about the heat and the humidity, but this is a very different forecast to what we're used to as we go into the end of summer. So you probably won't get too much use out of the rain jacket or the raincoat, but that remains to be seen. It's always better to be safe than sorry. Just keep it over there in your passenger seat of your car and keep that umbrella over there in your driver's side door. Now taking a look at your morning lows. So we saw the downtick in the high temperatures because of the cloud cover each afternoon. That makes sense. You have more clouds in the picture. They're blocking more sunshine, so the surface can't get as warm. Well, the morning lows, it does the opposite. When you have clouds that linger into the overnight hours into the early morning time frame, they're trapping any of that surface heat that does remain from the day before, and that's just going to kind of create a warmer surface during the morning hours. So when you have widespread cloud cover, it increases your low temperatures overnight into the early morning hours, and it does limit how much you warm up in the afternoons. So we kind of see the reciprocal on this graphic. 64 right now on Thursday, 66 to kick off Friday and Saturday, and 65 on Sunday. Overall, yes, this is warmer than the 58 I had forecasted for this morning, but these are still pretty well below average, and they're still going to have a very pleasant feel to them. We may have some more moisture in the forecast, but obviously you can get dew point temperatures that are above your actual number. So all we may be looking at is some dew point temperatures in the mid 60s to go along with some of these temperatures that are there around 64, 65, and 66. But I did mention that we will talk about the records. Obviously, 58 was what we recorded in the Macon area this morning. We did have a lot of 57s that were popping up on our 5-minute observation station down at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. I originally had 59. Obviously, I bumped it down to 58 this morning, but what I had yesterday was a morning low temperature of 59 degrees. And the record, 57 back in 1952 that we were talking about, that 73-year-old record. So we had a couple 57s that got recorded, although we do have some rounding errors when it comes to that. So each increment that you go down in terms of the Fahrenheit temperature sometimes can round up or it can round down. And in this case, it was rounding down to 57 degrees when in reality, the temperature recorded in Celsius rounded up to 58 degrees. So I confirmed with the National Weather Service, and they did confirm that 58 will be what pops up on our almanac a little bit later. Just 1 degree above the record, but really just goes to show that we don't see this all the time. Last time we saw a temperature of 57 degrees, near 57 degrees, 1952. So yes, this is very, very abnormal for the end of August. But hey, there are no complaints from this weatherman right here, and hopefully a lot of you are enjoying a bit of a cool down, and actually not even a bit of a cool down, a major cool down after the very hot stretch of weather that we have had. And we're pairing up these cooler temperatures with an abundance of sunshine. That has been a pleasant change of pace from these dreary stretches that we've had that have kept the temperatures down, but it's been a messy forecast. You haven't necessarily wanted to walk outside. All of this weather has been paired up with some predominantly sunny conditions. So going over the humidity day by day on this muggy meter, remember the categories. 70s, that's where your dew point temperatures are in the 70s. You see dark green colors, very muggy conditions. 60s, a noticeable humidity. However, the light green color isn't too bad. We definitely will take that by any means during the summertime. But then you get down into the 50s and the 40s, and this is going to be more reminiscent of your dew point temperatures in the fall and the winter seasons, maybe a little bit into early spring. Well, take a look at this, a steady uptick as we go day by day, and eventually Saturday, we're trying to flirt with that line of upper 60s and low 70s for the dew point temperatures. We could have some patches of dark green that build back into the forecast on Saturday, and you will notice a correlation with this graphic. Saturday, that's when our dew point temperatures and the humidity levels should be the highest over the course of the next week. Well, Saturday is going to correlate to my best rain chance, and long-range models getting into a little bit of a better agreement as we go into Saturday. It does look like the morning hours could be quite dreary. And then as we go all the way through Saturday, it may be a story of on again and off again showers, maybe even a storm or two. Can't rule that out, especially if we get the uptick in humidity. But right now, cloud cover will be very widespread as well, so that's going to help keep the high temperatures down, at least limit how much heat that we can have according to what the actual temperature is. And then along with that, yes, moisture is enough to work with in terms of widespread rain chances. You obviously don't need the temperatures to have it rain during the winter months. You can have a day with a high forecasted of 40 degrees, 50 degrees. And yes, obviously that's not warm enough to sprout some afternoon rain chances, but you still can have a humid atmosphere and you can have a driving mechanism that can lead to some rain chances. But it does look like the messy picture stays in order for Sunday and continues into your Labor Day Monday. Still not the best agreement. Like I said, I think what you should plan on are some scattered showers and some thunderstorms. If you see a thunderstorm, it's just going to be a quick round of some heavy rain, maybe a rumble of thunder or two, but overall nothing in the way of severe weather looks to be in the picture. And then by the time we go into next Wednesday, seeing signs of potentially clearing again. So as we go into the beginning of next week, I'm keeping my eyes on maybe another frontal boundary that could usher in a reinforcing push of that cooler and that drier air. And that could set us up for another pattern like we're having as of right now as we go into the midweek next week. But we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. And that will, of course, be into the first couple days of September. So yes, like I said, still no sign of the 90s returning whatsoever. But let's check in on the tropics. Tropical storm Fernand, and that continues to move up to the north and the northeast. Actually predominantly moving to the east right now at 12 miles per hour. Still maintaining tropical storm status winds at 45 miles per hour. That pressure still sits above 1,000 millibars and forecasted to try to weaken again once again. So we were really thinking that this storm would lose its lifespan by the time we got into early this morning. Well, the National Hurricane Center seems to hint that it has some form of circulation left. Obviously, if it has winds of 45 miles per hour, it still has decent organization associated with it, but it will continue to weaken as you go day by day. Thursday, 40 mile per hour winds and then 35 mile per hour winds. This is when Fernand would become a tropical depression. Once you get those winds below 39 miles per hour, I do believe, that's when you get out of tropical storm status, and that's where it doesn't quite have enough organization. Obviously, 35 mile per hour winds, that would be a pretty gusty and a pretty windy day here in central Georgia, but associated with these tropical systems, that is really just a drop in the bucket for how gusty those winds can actually get. And other than Fernand, we have nothing in the tropics. It is a very quiet period, but not to discount the fact that it still could be an active hurricane season. We had a lull just like this as we went into an active portion of hurricane season, into the month of August and transitioned into September. We didn't have much activity, and obviously we know that activity got going very quickly once we got somewhere around the peak of hurricane season into the later portion of September. But the big reason right now for no activity, I do believe, is attributed to this dust plume that we continue to see all this Saharan dust off the west coast of Africa. So anything that's coming off tropical wave wise that you can see on this satellite imagery right now is hovering really close to the equator. So it's obviously not going to get its act together whatsoever. And this environment right here is typically where tropical systems try to start to encounter that warm Atlantic water. And that's when they start to maybe gain some organization as they move farther and farther to the west. But again, we don't just look off the west coast of Africa. We'll have to look over in the Caribbean. We'll have to look in the Gulf and make sure that we can't spot anything that tries to develop in those very warm waters that are a little bit closer to home. So this is as of the 8 a.m. update. We'll continue to provide you with updates on this each and every extended forecast that I do show you, but we don't need to worry about the tropics for right now. It's just something that we here on the weather team will notify you if there is a system that we need to worry about. So increasing rain chances as we go into the weekend. Again, I think they're going to be pretty scattered Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe into Labor Day Monday. We'll see those rain chances try to linger into the first official day of September, Labor Day Monday, and of course the start of meteorological fall. It is a very busy September 1st here all across the country. But high temperatures will go down a little bit more than what they have been the last couple of days, somewhere in the low 80s, near 80 degrees. It's all going to be dependent on the cloud cover that you have. Some areas might increase into the mid to the upper 80s, but overall, I don't think anyone's going to crawl back below or back to around average or even above average for the foreseeable future. And hopefully we can see some good signs of these rain chances lessening as we go into Wednesday next week. Obviously, the long-range models didn't have anything as of right now, but that's still a week out in time. So we'll continue to fine-tune that. I think the main thing that you need to know is, obviously, whatever plans that you have over the course of this weekend, probably better to have them indoors, but you still have a decent shot of not seeing the rain. 30 and 40% chances of rain. That's still not a slam dunk for about what's going to happen, but the models just really haven't come into the best agreement. So we like to see agreement before we go ahead and tell you, okay, this is going to be kind of a deluge and kind of a dreary day, but I do believe the cloud cover is going to make for a pretty gloomy atmosphere. Maybe not the best, and or definitely not compared to what we've had yesterday and what we have today with the mostly sunny skies. But we'll take what we can get, because every single temperature that you see, whether it's a morning low or whether it's an afternoon high temperature, still well below average. These numbers around 80 degrees, 11 degrees below average this time of year, and the morning low temperatures still should be scattered about the mid 60s all the way into next week before, wham, Tuesday, we're back into the lower 60s. Maybe do I have another day that I can throw up an upper 50 for a morning low by the time we roll into next Wednesday? Only time will tell, but just continue to enjoy the pleasant stretch of weather. Bit of a gloomy forecast for your 3-day weekend. Just be prepared to duck and dodge a shower, maybe even a short-lived storm or two. But overall, enjoy the cooler temperatures and be very thankful we're not hovering somewhere in the mid-90s with dew point temperatures near 80 degrees, where those numbers would feel like the triple digits and beyond. Thanks for tuning in. We'll have another look at your extended forecast.